The basement door slammed shut behind me with a finality that still echoes in my nightmares. One stolen candy bar. That's what it took for my aunt to reveal who she truly was. While my mother worked to rebuild our lives, I learned how quickly a perfect suburban home could become a prison, and how completely adults could look away from a child suffering. If not for a forgotten camera capturing what no one wanted to see, I might still be counting the hours in darkness. This is my story of survival, of the monsters that hide behind smiles, and how as a kid, I discovered that sometimes being heard is the most powerful form of escape. I was 9 when Mom said, "Just for a little while." Her eyes were red and puffy as she knelt in front of me, hands trembling slightly as she adjusted my jacket collar. The morning sun streamed through our apartment windows, casting long shadows across the packed suitcase at my feet. "It's just until I sort things out," Mom whispered, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear. Her name was Deidre, and I'd never seen her look so defeated. "Just a week or 2 at Aunt Carla's, Lana. I promise." I didn't want to go. Every cell in my body screamed to stay, but I nodded bravely, swallowing the lump in my throat. Mom had lost her job at the hospital 2 months ago, and our landlord wasn't being patient anymore. I'd overheard the hushed phone calls, Mom's desperate pleas for more time. "I'll be okay," I said, though my voice betrayed me by cracking. I clutched the bracelet Mom had slipped onto my wrist that morning, a simple silver chain with a tiny star charm. "This will keep you brave," she told me, "and remind you that I'm coming back for you." The drive to Aunt Carla's house took 40 minutes, each passing mile making my stomach twist tighter. I'd only met Aunt Carla a handful of times at family gatherings. She was Mom's older sister, always dressed impeccably with perfectly styled blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. When we pulled into the driveway, I couldn't help but stare. Aunt Carla's home looked picture-perfect from the outside, a 2-story white colonial with emerald green shutters, neatly trimmed hedges, and a wooden swing on the porch. It looked like something from a magazine, nothing like our cramped apartment with the leaky faucet and creaky floors. Aunt Carla stepped out onto the porch, her daughter Tessa half hidden behind her. They both wore matching blue dresses, and Aunt Carla's smile was syrupy sweet as she waved at us. "Deidre, darling." And little Lana.
"Come in, come in."
Her voice was musical, practiced. She glided down the steps to greet us, her hand landing firmly on my shoulder. I flinched slightly. Her grip was just a little too tight, her fingernails pressing through the fabric of my jacket. Mom didn't seem to notice. She was too busy thanking Carla, explaining how she'd send money when she could, how grateful she was. I tuned it out, looking instead at my cousin Tessa, who was studying me with curious eyes. She was my age but taller, with perfect golden curls and a pink headband. She didn't smile. "Tessa, why don't you show Lana to her room?" Aunt Carla suggested after the adults had finished talking. "The small one next to the linen closet." Mom hugged me one last time, too tight and too quick. "I love you, baby. Be good for your aunt." And then she was gone, her car disappearing down the street, while I stood in Aunt Carla's immaculate foyer, clutching my worn suitcase with white knuckles. "Well," Aunt Carla said, her sweet tone evaporating the moment Mom's car turned the corner. "Let's get you settled." This small room was barely bigger than a closet, with a twin bed, a nightstand, and nothing else. The walls were stark white, and a single window overlooked the backyard. I placed my suitcase on the bed and tried not to cry. "Dinner's at 6, Aunt Carla informed me from the doorway. "Tessa eats first, then adults, then you. That's how we do things here." I frowned. "Why can't we all eat together?" Something flashed in Aunt Carla's eyes, cold and sharp. "Tessa's your cousin, not your friend. There's a hierarchy in this house, and you'd do well to remember it." That first evening set the tone for everything that followed. Tessa got to eat first, play first, bathe first. I was given the leftovers, the hand-me-downs, the cold bathwater. When I tried to play with Tessa's dolls after dinner, Aunt Carla swiftly intervened. "Those are Tessa's things," she said. "You don't touch what isn't yours." Uncle Ray came home late that night. He was tall and lean with kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled at me. "You must be Lana," he said, offering me a gentle handshake. "Welcome to our home." Something in his demeanor made me think he might be an ally, but his kindness was distant, cautious. He seemed uncomfortable when I was around, his eyes darting to Aunt Carla as if seeking approval. I later learned he'd just installed a new nanny cam system throughout the house, but he never mentioned it. The next morning, Aunt Carla presented me with a list of house rules, typed and laminated. "Rule number 7 is very important," she said, tapping the paper with her perfectly manicured nail. "Never go near the basement." I scanned the list. Rule number 7. The basement is strictly off-limits. "Why?" I asked. "What's down there?" Aunt Carla's eyes went cold. "Just don't." She handed me a rag and furniture polish. "Now clean the living room bookshelves. All of them." Days passed, and the subtle isolation grew more pronounced. While Tessa received new toys and constant praise, I was given an endless stream of chores: washing dishes, folding laundry, scrubbing toilets. My hands grew raw from cleaning chemicals. On the third night, I tried calling Mom from the kitchen phone while Aunt Carla was upstairs. "Who are you calling?" Aunt Carla's voice made me jump. She'd appeared silently in the doorway. "My mom," I whispered. "I just want to see how she's doing." Aunt Carla plucked the phone from my hand and hung it up. "She asked for space, Lana. She's busy sorting out her situation." The way she said it made it sound dirty, shameful. "Besides, calls cost money, and you're already costing us enough." I nodded, fighting back tears, and returned to scrubbing the kitchen floor. That weekend, Uncle Ray was home more. He worked as a sales manager for a tech company and often traveled during the week. He was quiet, but observed everything with watchful eyes. Once, when Aunt Carla sent me to weed the garden in the rain, I caught him watching from the window, his expression troubled. Another time, I stumbled carrying a stack of plates to the kitchen, and one crashed to the floor. Before Aunt Carla could reach me, Uncle Ray was there, kneeling beside me. "Accidents happen," he said softly, helping me pick up the shards. But he fell silent when Aunt Carla entered, her face like thunder. "Clumsy little thing, aren't you?" she hissed, grabbing my arm and yanking me away from the mess. "Go to your room. No dinner tonight." Uncle Ray opened his mouth as if to protest, then closed it again, his gaze dropping to the floor. One evening, while taking out the trash, I noticed something silver glinting among the garbage. My bracelet, the one Mom had given me to keep me brave. Aunt Carla had thrown it away, calling it cheap junk that was cluttering up the bathroom counter. I retrieved it quietly, cleaned it off, and hid it under my pillow. Tessa's behavior worsened when adults weren't around. She'd trip me in the hallway, hide my toothbrush, or mess up rooms I'd just cleaned. One afternoon, she deliberately spilled grape juice on the cream-colored carpet, then screamed for her mother. "Lana did it," she cried when Aunt Carla rushed in. She was running with her cup. Aunt Carla didn't even question it. She slapped me lightly on the wrist and pushed me toward the cleaning supplies. "Clean it up. Now." Uncle Ray witnessed the whole thing from the doorway, but said nothing. His eyes met mine for a brief moment, apologetic, perhaps, before he turned and walked away. By the end of the first week, Mom still hadn't called. My stomach growled constantly from the meager portions Aunt Carla allowed me. One night, unable to sleep from hunger, I crept downstairs to the kitchen. The house was silent, everyone asleep. I opened the pantry door and found a shelf of snacks hidden in the back: cookies, chips, candy bars, all labeled Tessa in Aunt Carla's neat handwriting. My mouth watered. I hadn't had a treat since arriving. I shouldn't, I thought. But my empty stomach won the argument. I took a small candy bar, just one, and retreated to the bathroom to eat it, careful to catch every crumb and wrapper in my hand. The chocolate was heaven, rich and sweet on my tongue. For a moment, I forgot where I was, forgot the constant criticism and loneliness. I savored each tiny bite, making it last as long as possible. When I was done, I wrapped the evidence in toilet paper and hid it deep under the bathroom sink, behind cleaning bottles. Then I crept back to bed, feeling guilty but satisfied. The next morning, Aunt Carla cornered me in the hallway, her face a mask of rage. In her hand was the candy wrapper. "You stole from my daughter," she growled, waving the evidence in my face. "You little thief." "I was hungry," I whispered, backing away from her.
I'm sorry.
"Thieves get punished," Aunt Carla said, her voice suddenly calm. Too calm. "And I know exactly where sneaky little thieves belong." The next morning dawned gray and overcast, matching the dread in my stomach. I'd barely slept, haunted by Aunt Carla's words and the candy wrapper she'd found. When I finally ventured out of my room, she was waiting. "Good morning, thief," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was still in her silk pajamas, coffee mug in hand. Tessa sat at the kitchen table, watching with undisguised glee as she munched on cinnamon toast, a breakfast I'd never been offered. "I'm sorry about the candy," I said, my voice small. "I was just really hungry." "Oh, I'm sure you were," Aunt Carla replied, setting down her mug with a deliberate click. "Hungry enough to steal from my daughter. To take what doesn't belong to you." She crossed the kitchen in 3 quick strides and grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "Since you like sneaking around so much, I think it's time you learned where sneaky things belong." My heart hammered against my ribs as she marched me through the house. I knew where we were going before we even reached it, the forbidden basement door at the end of the hall. The door I'd been explicitly warned never to approach. "Please, Aunt Carla," I begged, trying to pull away. "I won't do it again, I promise." She ignored my pleas, unlocking the basement door with a key she pulled from her pocket. With a swift motion, she pushed me forward and I stumbled, losing my balance. The door slammed shut behind me as I tumbled down the wooden stairs, landing hard on my left elbow. Pain shot up my arm, and I cried out, more from shock than injury. Above me, I heard the distinctive click of a lock turning, followed by the snap of a light switch. Darkness swallowed me whole. "Aunt Carla," I shouted, scrambling back up the stairs to pound on the door. "Please let me out."
I'm sorry.
"Sorry doesn't fix your behavior." Her voice came muffled through the door. "Maybe some time down there will teach you respect." "How long?" I asked, my voice cracking. Silence was my only answer. Then footsteps, growing fainter as she walked away. I slid down against the door, hugging my knees to my chest. Tears streamed down my face as the reality of my situation sank in. I was locked in the basement, the one place I'd been warned never to go. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I began to make out shapes around me. The basement was unfinished, concrete floors, exposed beams overhead, and stacks of cardboard boxes pushed against the walls. A single bare bulb hung from the ceiling in the far corner, offering meager, flickering light. The air was heavy with the smell of mold and dampness. Cold seeped up through the concrete, chilling me to the bone. There was no carpet, no furniture, nothing but hard surfaces and shadows. I huddled against the door, rubbing my bruised elbow and trying to control my breathing. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Surely Uncle Ray would come home and let me out. Or Aunt Carla would realize she'd gone too far. Hours passed. My stomach growled, reminding me that I hadn't eaten breakfast. My mouth was dry, my throat scratchy. The light bulb in the corner flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging me into total darkness. I stifled a sob, feeling my way along the wall until I found a tiny window near the ceiling, a ground-level window well covered in cobwebs and grime. It was too small for me to fit through and too high for me to reach, but it let in a sliver of gray daylight. From upstairs, I could hear muffled sounds, footsteps, voices, the television. Once, I heard Tessa's laughter, high and delighted, and imagined her playing with the toys I wasn't allowed to touch. "Help!" I called again, banging on the door.
Please.
"I need water." No response came. Eventually, I heard the front door open and close, followed by a man's voice. Uncle Ray was home. My heart leapt with hope. "Where's Lana?" I heard him ask, his voice barely audible through the floorboards. "She's resting," came Aunt Carla's casual reply. "Had a bit of a tantrum earlier." I pounded on the door again. "Uncle Ray, I'm down here." But my voice didn't carry, or perhaps he chose not to hear. As night fell, the basement grew even colder. I curled into myself, using my arms as a pillow against the hard floor. Something scratched in the corner, mice probably. The thought made my skin crawl, but exhaustion eventually pulled me into a fitful sleep. I dreamed of Mom, of our tiny apartment that now seemed like paradise compared to this dark prison. I dreamed she was calling my name, searching for me, but couldn't hear my answers. When I woke, stiff and shivering, I reached instinctively for my bracelet. It was still there, wrapped around my wrist, the tiny star charm catching what little light filtered through the dirty window. Just for a little while, I whispered to myself, echoing Mom's promise. Just for a little while. The words became my mantra, the only thing keeping panic at bay. By the second day, hunger had become a physical ache, a hollow feeling that made it hard to think clearly. My lips were cracked from dehydration. I licked condensation off the cold concrete walls, the moisture barely enough to wet my tongue. From above, I heard voices, unfamiliar ones. Guests, perhaps. I heard Aunt Carla laughing, the clink of glasses, the sounds of a normal household carrying on while I sat forgotten in the dark. Did Mom know where I was? Had Aunt Carla called her? Would anyone look for me down here? The basement door creaked open on the morning of my third day in darkness. Light flooded in, blinding me temporarily. I shielded my eyes with my arm, squinting at the silhouette in the doorway. Aunt Carla stood there, perfectly put together in a floral dress, her hair swept into an elegant bun. In one hand, she held a small bottle of water. In the other, a piece of bread that looked stale and hard. "Learned your lesson yet?" she asked, her voice eerily calm. I nodded desperately, though I wasn't entirely sure what lesson I was supposed to have learned. She tossed the water and bread onto the floor at my feet. The bottle rolled, stopping just short of a puddle of stagnant water in the corner. "You want more?" she asked as I lunged for the water, unscrewing the cap with shaking hands. "Apologize to Tessa. Tell her how sorry you are for stealing what's hers." I gulped the water, some of it spilling down my chin in my haste. The coolness in my parched throat was heaven. "Is Tessa here?" I asked, my voice hoarse from disuse. "No," Aunt Carla replied. "But you can tell me, and I'll pass along the message." Something stirred inside me then, a tiny spark of defiance amid the fear and hunger. I looked up at her, clutching the half-empty water bottle to my chest. "I took one candy bar because I was hungry," I said. "I am sorry about that. But Tessa has everything, and I have nothing here." Aunt Carla's face hardened. "Still so entitled," she muttered. "Just like your mother." The door slammed shut again, the lock clicking into place with finality. Despite everything, I hadn't begged. I hadn't cried in front of her. That small victory was all I had as darkness enveloped me once more. Uncle Ray sat at his desk in the home office, rubbing his tired eyes. It was nearly midnight, but he needed to finish preparing for tomorrow's sales presentation. The house was quiet. Carla and Tessa had gone to bed hours ago. He clicked through his slides one last time, making small adjustments. As he worked, a notification popped up on his laptop, a reminder about backing up the nanny cam footage. Ray had installed the system the previous month, partly at Carla's insistence to keep an eye on things, and partly for his own peace of mind. Ray opened the footage folder, intending to do a quick save before shutting down for the night. He rarely reviewed the recordings. They were mostly for security purposes. But as he scrolled through the files, a timestamp caught his eye, 3 days ago, early morning. He vaguely remembered Carla mentioning something about Lana having a tantrum that day. Curious, he clicked play. The footage showed the hallway leading to the basement. Ray frowned. The camera angle was perfect to capture the basement door, a coincidence he hadn't noticed before. He watched as Carla appeared in the frame, dragging a small figure by the arm. "Lana." The audio was faint but clear enough. "Please, Aunt Carla, I won't do it again, I promise." Ray's stomach clenched as he watched his wife unlock the basement door and push the 9-year-old girl roughly forward. He could see Lana stumble, hear her cry out as she fell down the stairs. Then the sickening sound of the door slamming, the lock turning. What the hell? Ray whispered, his hand frozen over the mouse. He quickly checked other footage from that day, from subsequent days. There was Carla going about her business. There was Tessa playing in the living room. But no sign of Lana anywhere in the house. A cold realization washed over him. Lana hadn't been resting or sulking in her room, as Carla had claimed. She'd been in the basement. For 3 days. Ray's mind raced back through the past weeks, recalling moments that had made him uneasy. Lana flinching when Carla approached, the girl's increasingly gaunt appearance, the chores no 9-year-old should be burdened with. He'd noticed but had said nothing, done nothing. He thought of Deidre, Lana's mother, and the promise he'd made when she'd left her daughter in their care. We'll look after her like she's our own. Ray sat back in his chair, a wave of shame washing over him. How long had he ignored the signs? How many times had he chosen peace with Carla over standing up for what was right? He checked his watch, 12:15 a.m. Carla would be sound asleep by now, a heavy sleeper who rarely woke before 7. Ray moved silently through the darkened house, retrieving the basement key from the kitchen drawer where Carla kept it. At the basement door, he hesitated, steeling himself for what he might find. Then he turned the key and pulled the door open. The stench hit him first, dampness, mold, and something worse. Human fear. Human suffering. Lana, he called softly, flicking on the light switch. A small shape stirred in the corner, curled under a blanket of dust and cobwebs. As Ray descended the stairs, his heart breaking with each step, the shape unfolded itself slowly. Lana looked up at him with hollow eyes, her face dirty and streaked with dried tears. Her clothes, the same ones she'd been wearing 3 days ago, were filthy and rumpled. She'd grown noticeably thinner, her collarbones jutting sharply beneath her shirt. "Uncle Ray," she whispered, her voice a raspy shadow of itself. Ray knelt beside her, afraid to touch her, afraid she'd shatter like glass. "I'm here, Lana. I'm so sorry." He helped her stand, noting how she swayed with weakness. Without a word, he scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and carried her up the stairs. "Sure," he whispered when she began to tremble. "Don't be scared. I saw everything." He brought her to the guest room, as far from his and Carla's bedroom as possible. He gave her water, watching as she gulped it down, then refilled the glass twice more. He found crackers in the pantry and watched her eat them slowly, carefully, as if afraid they might be taken away. "Aunt Carla will be mad," Lana whispered, eyes darting to the door. "Let me worry about that," Ray said, his voice firm with a newfound resolve.
You need to rest.
"I'll be right outside if you need anything." Ray sat in the hallway outside the guest room all night, his laptop open, reviewing hours of footage. The evidence was damning. Carla's cruelty, Tessa's learned bullying, Lana's slow transformation from a normal 9-year-old to a frightened, starving child. Around 7:30 a.m., he heard Carla stirring. By the time she came downstairs in her silk robe, he was waiting in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in his hand, his expression unreadable. "Morning," she said, heading for the coffee pot. "You're up early." "Couldn't sleep," Ray replied, watching her closely. The front door opened and closed, the newspaper delivery. Carla went to retrieve it, and that's when she noticed the guest room door was closed. "Why is that door shut?" she asked, suddenly alert. She moved toward it, but Ray stepped in her path. "Lana's in there," he said quietly. Carla froze, her expression shifting from confusion to anger to something like fear before settling on indignation.
What?
"How did she?" "I let her out," Ray interrupted. "Last night." "You had no right," Carla hissed, keeping her voice low. "She was being punished. She stole from Tessa." "She took a candy bar because she was hungry," Ray countered, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel. "And you locked her in a cold, dark basement for 3 days without adequate food or water. Do you have any idea what could have happened to her? What could still happen if this gets out?" Carla's face paled slightly, but she recovered quickly.
She's fine.
"She's exaggerating, manipulating you. You've always been too soft." The guest room door opened then, and Lana appeared, still in her dirty clothes, her hair matted and tangled. She froze when she saw Carla, instinctively backing away. Carla's demeanor changed instantly, a sugary smile replacing her scowl. Lana, honey, I was so worried when I found you missing this morning. Lana said nothing, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. She snuck back up. Carla continued, turning to Ray with the same false smile. She manipulated you, can't you see? She's always been a problem child. Deidre warned me. Stop, Ray said firmly. I have it all on camera, Carla. The words hung in the air between them. Carla's smile faltered, then disappeared entirely. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice suddenly brittle. The nanny cams, Ray explained, gesturing to his laptop on the kitchen counter. They caught everything. You dragging her to the basement. You locking her in. You ignoring her pleas for help. Carla's face contorted with rage. You spied on me? In my own home. They're security cameras, Carla. They record everything, including child abuse. Lana, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Her voice was small but clear in the tense kitchen. She told me I was trash, she said, looking at Ray rather than at Carla. That I didn't deserve food. That mom abandoned me because I was worthless. Carla lunged forward, pointing a shaking finger at Lana. You ungrateful little liar. After everything I've done for you. Ray stepped between them. Go back to the guest room, Lana. Lock the door from inside. I need to talk to Aunt Carla alone. Lana didn't need to be told twice. She retreated quickly, the click of the lock audible in the silence that followed. Ray turned to his wife, no longer bothering to hide his disgust. What happened to you, Carla? She's a child. Your sister's child. Half-sister, Carla spat. And she's just like Deidre. Always taking, always needing. You have no idea what I've put up with. I'm calling Deidre, Ray said, reaching for his phone. And then I'm calling CPS unless you do it yourself right now. Carla's laugh was cold and sharp. You won't. You care too much about appearances, about what people will think. Poor Ray couldn't control his wife, couldn't protect a child in his own home. Something hardened in Ray's expression. Without another word, he scrolled through his contacts and dialed a number. Who are you calling? Carla demanded, panic edging into her voice. Mark, Ray replied, naming his lawyer friend. This isn't just emotional abuse, Carla. It's endangerment. Possibly assault. Carla's face went white. You wouldn't dare. Ray held her gaze as the phone rang. Watch me. While he waited for Mark to answer, Ray plugged a USB drive into his laptop and began copying the damning footage. Carla watched, her composure crumbling by the second. Later, as Ray spoke quietly with his lawyer friend in the living room, Carla began pounding on the guest room door where Lana had barricaded herself. Open this door, you little snake, she shouted. You've ruined everything. Ray ended his call and strode across the room, positioning himself between Carla and the door. His gentle, conflict-avoidant demeanor was gone, replaced by something harder, more resolute. That's enough, he said quietly. Get away from the door. Or what? Carla challenged, her perfect composure now completely shattered. What will you do, Ray? What can you possibly do? Ray didn't raise his voice, didn't make threats. He simply held up the USB drive containing the footage of her abuse. I'll let this speak for me, he said. And for Lana. For the first time since Ray had known her, Carla seemed at a loss for words. She stared at the USB drive, then at his face, recognition dawning in her eyes. Something was unraveling. Her control, her carefully constructed facade, perhaps even her sense of self. Behind the locked door, Lana pressed her ear against the wood, listening to the adults argue about her fate. She clutched her mother's bracelet, the tiny star charm cool against her palm. Just for a little while, she whispered to herself. Only now, for the first time since arriving at Aunt Carla's picture-perfect house, she actually believed it might be true. The guest room became my sanctuary that morning. Uncle Ray had brought me clean clothes, a sandwich, and more water than I could drink. He'd even found a small first aid kit and helped clean the scrapes on my elbow and knees. Every few minutes, he'd knock softly and ask if I was okay. I wasn't okay. But I was better than I'd been in the basement. Around noon, I heard a car screech into the driveway. Running footsteps pounded up the porch steps, followed by frantic knocking. Uncle Ray's voice, then another voice, familiar and desperate.
Mom.
The guest room door flew open, and there she was, her hair wild, her eyes red-rimmed and frantic. She wore the same blue uniform she'd had on when she dropped me off, like she'd come straight from work. "Lana," she cried, rushing forward. I practically fell into her arms, breathing in her familiar scent of hospital soap and the vanilla lotion she always used. She felt like home. "Baby, are you okay?" Mom asked, pulling back to examine my face, my arms, the dark circles under my eyes. Her hands trembled as they traced the bruise on my elbow. "What happened to you?" "She's just dramatic," Aunt Carla's voice came from the doorway. She stood there, arms crossed, her face a perfect mask of concern. "She made all this up." Mom turned slowly, her body shielding mine. "What did you do to my daughter, Carla?" Uncle Ray stepped between them, his normally gentle face hardened with resolve. "Deidre, there's something you need to see." He held up a small silver USB stick. "Let the footage talk." Mom looked confused, but she followed Uncle Ray to the living room, keeping me close against her side. Aunt Carla trailed behind us, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors like angry punctuation marks. "What footage?" Mom asked as Uncle Ray connected the USB to the television. "I installed nanny cams last month," he explained, navigating through files. "For security." They caught everything. The television screen flickered to life, showing the hallway leading to the basement. I flinched, burying my face against Mom's side. I didn't need to watch, I'd lived it. But Mom watched. I felt her body go rigid as the video showed Aunt Carla dragging me to the basement door. When the audio captured my cries and the sound of me tumbling down the stairs, Mom let out a strangled sound. "You monster," she whispered, turning to her sister. "She's 9 years old. She stole from Tessa," Aunt Carla said, but her voice had lost its conviction. Ray fast-forwarded, showing snippets from multiple days, Aunt Carla opening the door once to toss in water and bread, laughing with guests while I was locked below, telling Tessa that I was getting what I deserved. "You said she was happy," Mom yelled, rising to her feet. "You said she was adjusting well." "She needed discipline," Aunt Carla replied. "Something you clearly never provided." Mom lunged forward, but Uncle Ray caught her arm. "Not in front of Lana," he murmured. "There's more you need to see." As the footage continued, showing Aunt Carla's cruelty in painful detail, Mom held me tighter. When Rafe finally turned off the television, the silence in the room was deafening. "I'm calling the police," Mom said, her voice deadly quiet. "I already did," Uncle Ray replied, glancing at his watch. "They should be here any minute." As if on cue, blue and red lights flashed through the front windows. Aunt Carla went pale. "You wouldn't dare," she hissed at Uncle Ray. "I'm your wife." "And she's a child who nearly died in our basement," he replied, moving toward the front door. "I'm done being silent." 2 police officers entered, Officer Bennett, a tall black woman with kind eyes, and Officer Reynolds, a middle-aged white man with a notebook already in hand. They listened gravely as Uncle Ray explained the situation, then asked to see the footage. While they reviewed the evidence in the kitchen, Officer Bennett sat with me on the couch. "Can you tell me what happened, honey?" she asked gently. I looked at Mom, who nodded encouragingly, though tears streamed down her face. So I told the truth. All of it. How Aunt Carla had made me feel unwelcome from the start. The chores, the harsh words, the hunger. Taking the candy bar because my stomach hurt from emptiness. The basement, dark and cold and terrifying. She told me I was trash, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. That I didn't deserve food. That Mom abandoned me because I was worthless. Mom made it sound like something was breaking inside her. "I never should have left you. I had no idea, Lana. I swear I had no idea." Officer Reynolds emerged from the kitchen, his face grim. "We've seen enough," he said. "Mrs. Walker, we need you to come with us to the station." Aunt Carla stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. "This is ridiculous." It was just discipline. Locking a child in an unfinished basement for 3 days with inadequate food and water isn't discipline, ma'am, Officer Bennett said, rising from the couch. It's child endangerment and abuse. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. You can't be serious, Aunt Carla scoffed, but her voice wavered. Deadly serious, Officer Reynolds replied, producing a pair of handcuffs. As they led Aunt Carla away, Tessa appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Mommy, she called, her voice small and confused. Where are you going? Aunt Carla's composure finally broke. Tessa, baby, it's okay. Mommy will be home soon. This is all just a big misunderstanding. But the door closed behind her, and the police car pulled away, leaving Tessa standing on the stairs, bewildered and afraid. Uncle Ray approached her gently. Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you some breakfast. In the aftermath, a woman from Child Protective Services arrived, Miriam Davis, with silver-streaked dark hair and a soothing voice. She interviewed me separately, in the guest room, asking careful questions about my time at Aunt Carla's. You're brave, she told me when we finished, her eyes warm and sincere. And you did nothing wrong, Lana. Not one single thing. I wasn't sure I believed her yet, but I wanted to. Later that day, as Mom packed my few belongings, Uncle Ray asked to speak with me alone. He knelt before me in the hallway, his eyes red-rimmed and tired. I noticed things, he admitted quietly. The way she treated you. How afraid you were. I stayed silent too long, and for that, I am so sorry. I studied his face, the guilt etched in the lines around his eyes, the genuine remorse. I'm just glad you did eventually, I said. Thank you for getting me out. He nodded, blinking back tears. I'm going to make this right, Lana. I promise. As Mom and I prepared to leave, Tessa watched from the staircase, her expression unreadable. I wondered what would happen to her now, with her mother gone and her father's guilt hanging over the house like a shadow. In the car, Mom couldn't stop apologizing. I thought she would take care of you, she whispered, gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. She's my sister. I trusted her. It's not your fault, I said, though part of me wasn't sure I fully believed that yet. We're going to get through this, Mom promised, reaching over to squeeze my hand.
Together.
That night, in our tiny apartment that had never felt so wonderful, Mom gave me a notebook with a purple cover. For when you need to get the thoughts out of your head, she explained. I opened it to the first blank page and picked up a pen, hesitating for only a moment before writing. My name is Lana. I survived. And this is my story. The courtroom was packed on the first day of Aunt Carla's trial, 3 months after my rescue from the basement. Every wooden bench was filled with people, reporters from the local paper, neighbors who had always thought Aunt Carla was such a lovely woman, and strangers drawn by the sensational headlines. Woman locks niece in basement over candy bar. Mom had bought me a new navy dress for the occasion, and my hair was neatly braided. I felt small sitting in the front row, my hands twisting nervously in my lap. You don't have to look at her, Mom whispered, squeezing my hand. Just look at me or the judge. But when the side door opened and Aunt Carla entered in handcuffs, I couldn't help but stare. She looked different, thinner, paler, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail instead of her usual perfect style. She wore a gray pantsuit instead of her flowery dresses. Our eyes met briefly across the room. She looked away first. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecutor, Ms. Adams, spoke confidently about a disturbing pattern of abuse and shocking disregard for a child's well-being. Aunt Carla's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, talked about exaggerated memory and misunderstood intentions. The child was being disciplined, not abused, he argued, gesturing toward me as if I weren't even present. Mrs. Walker is a dedicated mother who is simply enforcing boundaries with a troubled niece. Mom's hand tightened around mine. Mr. Peterson continued, suggesting my memories were confused, that I'd been traumatized by my mother's abandonment and had transferred that anger to my aunt. Children often misremember events, he claimed. especially when they're already emotionally disturbed. Then Uncle Ray was called to testify. He walked to the witness stand, looking tired but determined. He'd lost weight since I'd last seen him, and new lines creased his forehead. He glanced at Aunt Carla once, then fixed his gaze on the prosecutor. "Mr. Walker," Ms. Adams began, "could you tell the court what you observed regarding your wife's treatment of her niece, Lana Bryant?" Uncle Ray cleared his throat. At first, it was subtle. Extra chores for Lana, smaller portions at meals, harsh words when she thought I wasn't listening. I noticed, but I didn't want to believe what I was seeing. And what changed? I reviewed the nanny cam footage and saw her dragging Lana to the basement. Saw her lock her in. Heard her ignore Lana's cries for help. Mr. Peterson stood up. "But you didn't check the basement immediately, did you? You waited." Uncle Ray's face flushed with shame.
Yes.
"Until that night. I should have acted sooner." "So you weren't concerned enough to check right away?" Objection. Ms. Adams called, badgering the witness. "Sustained," the judge replied. As Uncle Ray continued his testimony, he added details I hadn't known, how he'd noticed food missing from my plate, how Aunt Carla had thrown away cards I'd made for Mom, how she'd told neighbors I was troubled and manipulative. "She systematically isolated Lana," he concluded, his voice breaking slightly. "And I let it happen in my home." On the third day of the trial, it was my turn to testify. Walking to the witness stand felt like crossing an ocean. Each step seemed to take enormous effort, and my heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. The bailiff helped me adjust the microphone, and the judge smiled kindly. "Just tell the truth, Lana," she said. "That's all you need to do."
So I did.
I told the court about the candy bar and the basement, about the hunger and the darkness, about the mice and the cold concrete floor, about Aunt Carla's words, "Thieves get punished." My voice shook at first, but grew stronger as I continued. When Mr. Peterson tried to suggest I was exaggerating, I looked him straight in the eye. I counted the stairs when I fell. There were 14. I counted the hours by watching the tiny bit of light from the window change. I counted how many times I heard Tessa laugh upstairs while I was locked below. The courtroom was silent when I finished. Even Mr. Peterson seemed at a loss for words. Then Ms. Adams stood up. "Your Honor, we'd like to present the video evidence." The nanny cam footage played on a large screen facing the jury. The images were clear, the audio unmistakable. Aunt Carla shoving me down the stairs, locking the door, ignoring my pleas. When the video showed her tossing the water bottle and stale bread onto the basement floor, saying, "You want more?" "Apologize to Tessa." A woman in the audience gasped audibly. Suddenly, Aunt Carla shot to her feet. "That's not what happened," she shouted, pointing at the screen. "She's manipulated all of you. She was stealing, sneaking around. You little snake." The judge banged her gavel. "Mrs. Walker, control yourself or you'll be removed from the courtroom." Aunt Carla's lawyer pulled her back into her seat, whispering urgently in her ear, but the damage was done. The jury had seen her rage, her loss of control, just as I had seen it so many times before. Mom testified next, her voice steady despite her tears. She admitted her mistake in trusting Aunt Carla but emphasized, "No child deserves that. Especially mine." When asked why she'd left me with her sister, Mom explained about losing her job, about nearly being evicted, about Aunt Carla offering to help. "I was desperate," she said. And Carla seemed so caring, so willing to help. I never imagined she would hurt Lana. The jury deliberated for nearly 5 hours. Mom and I sat in a small waiting room, barely speaking. She held my hand the entire time. When we returned to the courtroom for the verdict, I chewed nervously on my sleeve, watching the clock tick forward in agonizing increments. The jury foreman stood, a paper trembling slightly in her hand. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Carla Walker, guilty on all counts of child endangerment and abuse." Mom let out a sob beside me, pulling me close. Across the room, Aunt Carla sat very still, her face blank with shock. The judge announced that sentencing would be scheduled for the following month. As the bailiff led Aunt Carla away, she turned to look at me one last time. I didn't look away. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for statements, but Mom hurried me to the car, shielding me from their questions. Before we could leave, Uncle Ray approached, kneeling down to my eye level just as he had that day in his hallway. "Thank you for staying strong," he said simply, his eyes wet with unshed tears. I nodded, not knowing what else to say. He hadn't caused the harm, but he hadn't prevented it either. Yet in the end, he had saved me. It was complicated, this feeling, not quite forgiveness, not quite gratitude, but something in between. As we drove away, Mom asked, "Are you okay?" I looked out at the courthouse receding in the distance. "I think I will be." A month later, we returned to the courthouse for Aunt Carla's sentencing. The room was less crowded this time, the initial sensation having faded from the local news cycle. Mom wore her best dress, a simple blue one she saved for special occasions, and I wore the silver bracelet she'd given me, the one that was supposed to keep me brave. Judge Harrison looked solemn as she delivered her decision. "Carla Walker, this court sentences you to 5 years in state prison for child endangerment and abuse." I watched from a distance as Aunt Carla was led away. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by an orange jumpsuit that hung loosely on her frame. She didn't look back this time. Outside the courtroom, Uncle Ray approached us cautiously, Tessa trailing behind him. "We won't take much of your time," he said, his voice gentle. "I just wanted you to know that I've filed for divorce and have been granted full custody of Tessa." Tessa stood half-hidden behind her father, her eyes downcast. She looked different, less polished, more like a normal kid in jeans and a t-shirt with slightly messy hair. I wondered if she missed her mother, or if she was relieved. "I've also started her in therapy," Ray continued, resting a hand on Tessa's shoulder. "For both of us, actually. Trying to undo some of the damage Carla caused." Mom nodded stiffly. "I hope it helps." As they turned to leave, Tessa suddenly looked up, meeting my eyes. She didn't speak, but something passed between us, a flicker of understanding, perhaps, or the shared experience of living under Aunt Carla's shadow. In the weeks that followed, life began to find a new rhythm. Mom had secured a position at a different hospital, working night shifts that paid better. We still struggled financially, but we were together, and that was what mattered. My 5th grade teacher, Ms. Williams, assigned a personal narrative essay entitled "A Challenging Experience." Most kids wrote about losing a pet or moving to a new school. I wrote about the basement. Ms. Williams read my essay with wide eyes, then asked if she could submit it to a youth writing competition. "Your voice deserves to be heard, Lana," she said. 3 months later, I stood on a stage at the county library, accepting a statewide essay award. My hands trembled as I approached the microphone, but my voice remained steady as I read my story aloud. Mom sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Beside her, unexpectedly, sat Uncle Ray. He'd asked permission to attend, and Mom had reluctantly agreed. After the ceremony, a local news reporter approached with a microphone and camera. "Lana, do you regret anything about what happened?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. "I regret being silent," I finally said. "But I'm not anymore." That interview led to an invitation to write for the school newspaper, which evolved into a personal blog. I wrote about things most adults wanted to ignore: kids who weren't believed, secrets hidden behind perfect doors, the courage it took to speak up when everyone expected silence. One rainy afternoon, a letter arrived in our mailbox. No return address, just my name written in neat, masculine handwriting. Inside was a brief note from Uncle Ray. "Dear Lana, I think about you often and hope you're doing well. I wanted you to know that I finally quit pretending that my marriage was healthy, that silence was easier than confrontation, that looking away was the same as not seeing. I've sold the house and used the money to open a safe house for children like you, those who need temporary shelter and protection. Tessa is doing better with therapy and has even started volunteering with me on weekends. Your courage changed everything. Gratefully, Ray." I showed the letter to Mom, who read it with a complex expression, part anger, part grudging respect. "Are you going to write back?" she asked. "Not yet," I replied. "Maybe someday." By the following summer, Mom had saved enough for us to move to a better apartment closer to my school. It wasn't fancy, but it had 2 bedrooms and a small balcony where I started a container garden, herbs and flowers that needed light to grow. On weekends, I began volunteering at a local center for abused kids. I didn't share my story with every child, but when I met those with hollow eyes and defensive postures, I sometimes whispered, "I understand. I've been there too." Some days were still hard. I had nightmares about the basement, about darkness closing in. I flinched at certain sounds, a door slamming, keys jingling. But the bad days grew fewer as the good days multiplied. On my 10th birthday, Mom gave me a locket with her picture inside. "So you always know I'm with you," she said. I wore it alongside my star bracelet, symbols of before and after, of loss and recovery. That night, sitting on our small balcony watching the sunset, I thought about everything that had happened. The basement had been dark, but I had emerged from it. Aunt Carla had tried to break me, but I had grown stronger instead. I thought I was just a girl in the dark, I wrote in my journal later. But now I know I was never the one who needed hiding. The words felt true as I wrote them, a testament to the journey from victim to survivor. I had been silenced but found my voice. I had been locked away but refused to remain hidden. My story wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, I would be the one telling it. What darkness might be hiding behind the perfect doors in your own neighborhood. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share to help other voices be heard. Your support brings more survivors' stories to light.